I'm very proud to be showing Vivienne's new work. This is a UK premiere of her new work, The Irreducible Difference of the Other. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Vivienne through showing many of her older works over the last few years, and I'm very, very happy to see her new work is still as uncompromising and radical as ever. And I'm very glad that the LSFF and the ICA are still supporting this kind of work, because it's the opportunities for showing this kind of work and disseminating are getting narrower and narrower. So I'm really, really happy to be hosting it. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the films. So I think we'll begin with the title of the film, because I think the title, as soon as you read the title, you're already watching the film, or you're starting to think about the film. It's already, you're working, or you're thinking about things. So can you tell us a little bit about this title for you?
I know it's a bit of a mouthful, and I know that it's kind of a little cheeky kind of title, because it's sort of saying, what the hell is this, when you see a film with a title like that, I think, because it's like, but it's sort of, the title is a starting point to, it's like a little bit provocative. It's to get people to sort of make a little bit of an effort to think about some things. That's really why I have that title. But also, I mean, you could, I suppose, analyse it, or you could interpret it in many different ways. I suppose I would say the title basically is steeped with Irigaray, because I'm very interested in her writing and what she, I'm fascinated with her writing, in fact, and so it echoes her work, where she talks about many things, including that we have to find a new, healthier and more vital way to relate to the other. And she particularly talks about the couple and how there are a lot of problems there, which of course we all know from our own from theory from back in decades now. For example, women has often been positioned as the other, but I think it's also to do with a broader sense of the other, in terms of like the other being, could be any kind of other, could be ethnic, could be different culture, different race, etc., etc. And I've always been interested in issues around relationship, and this goes right back to my first film, and that's why I programmed it with this one. And it seems to me, from what I've been reading, that throughout most of history, that relationship has been about dominating the other, as opposed to finding some way to, find some reciprocal way to relate. And when you see this in history and how countries work with other countries, for example, the more powerful, for example, if you take America, for example, the relationship is usually based on announcing that their way is the only way, etc., etc. So it just seems so kind of tired and so old that we have to find a way to move beyond that now. That those skills of negotiation, of listening, of all those things are vital if we're going to survive, basically.
And the irreducible difference as well, I see, is a reference to a lot of the feminism, the French feminism, rather than the kind of identity politics of equality. It's more about difference, and that there is a sort of a line, or that isn't, I'm not the same as you. We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, just that there is a difference, yeah. I mean, that if there's a difference that we can, or if that, people have different ways of understanding things, people have different perspectives, and that you can't have one collapse into the other, that there's the necessity to respect that, basically.
And throughout your film, I mean, there's a lot of, in terms of like relationship and like domination. Your film is, I mean, people say non-linear, but I don't really like this term. I prefer maybe to use the term open narrative or open montage. So you can sort of see this going through the form as well as the content. Can you talk to us maybe a little bit about how you start to make this film, about your process? Because I remember you told me you were making a film about war, and this is the film that comes from that beginning. And if you can tell us a little bit about that process.
I had funding from the Arts Council for this film, and I asked if I could make a film where the subject matter would be, I'd be looking at areas around difference, around war and vulnerability, and that I wanted to make something where I didn't really know where it would end up or how I would set about doing it. And in fact, I said as well that that's how I always work. Anyway, it works as a process, and I shoot material, and it coalesces. It comes together when I'm editing, and it can be quite scary if sometimes, especially if you're got a larger budget. There wasn't such a big budget for this, but well, I worked with an editor on this, and that was really an amazing experience, because it would be quite difficult to work with me as an editor because of not being sure where I'm going, as it works. You have to try out things and everything. So it was fantastic to work with somebody who was able to get into the same mode or something, and we were able to hit things off each other and everything. That's such a wonderful thing to I mean, collaboration when it works is extraordinary, and that can be the same with music as well. I've had that experience, and also working with some of the people who contributed to the film. For example, Jennifer Walsh, who made those amazing sounds with her voice. It was a fantastic that she brought that to the film, because I didn't really know what she was going to do when she turned the recorder on and put the microphone right up to her mouth. I didn't know what she was going to do. So Jennifer, as a matter of fact, is performing in the Queen Elizabeth Hall on Tuesday in a show of experimental music, and she's doing some of her voice work.
Jennifer is an experimental Irish composer who's a big track record behind her. And Alwyn Fouer, who plays Antonin Artaud, and also the woman figure, I guess herself in a way, in this. Also is like a very established actor, theatre actor, Beckett actor as well. So is yours as well. Vivienne has often worked with, and have you seen as you saw in the other film, like with friends or with non-actors and so on. So this is also like you were collaborating with other sort of professionals in their fields, as well as the editor. So was it such your DIY kind of life was changing?
The thing about working with Alwyn as well is that it's not like a character, a part, a role that you can say, I want you to play this role. It isn't like that. We're kind of, when we set out on the first day, I'd never worked with before, it was very, I didn't really know how to direct her as such, and it was difficult for, she's such an incredible performer that she brings a sort of a power to her performance, and that's what we were looking for. I mean, she's somebody who gives 100%. I'd seen Alwyn play Artaud before, and she did a performance of Here Lies as a theatre piece, and it was recorded on low video and VHS, and I showed it in the Tate a couple of years ago, and she wanted to do something with Artaud again, so it seemed perfect to have Artaud in this film, because he's such an extraordinary power in the 20th century. It seems like he's such a
visionary, seer.
He's a visionary. And he's constantly struggling with language, always battling to be able to describe something, and it slips away all the time. It's such a painful thing for him, but it's so extraordinary because, in a way, we can't really describe being alive in words, it seems like. And perhaps that's something, what I'm trying to do with the film is that it becomes a kind of physical experience, that perhaps watching the film becomes something that is non-verbal, and that is very physical and is meditative. Because I think for Artaud, and it's something I believe in as well. And Professor Irigaray, many people talk about, like, we're in such a noisy, dense world that's kind of closing in on us in this period of late capitalism. Everything, all the space, everything visual is being taken over, and it is going to make us ill. We are becoming ill, and in order to kind of get back to ourselves, we need to find a space to meditate or to ground ourselves or whatever, you know. So I try to do that with the film, with the long shots, and you know, that sense of the merging with the sea at the end.
And when we were speaking earlier, you talked about that scene as marching into the unconscious, which I really thought about when I was watching it tonight.
The sea can be the unconscious. It can be, it's something that is unlimited. It's something that's fluid. It's the unconscious. It's so many different things. It's not just one, you know. Yeah. Well, I think with the film and playing with different formats as well, to me was interesting to be working with high 8, SD, Super 8, and mixing them up and having it wide and having it narrow and having the different kind of textures. That was sort of important as well. It makes it more physical somehow. And of course Jennifer's sound as well, because it's coming from inside her body, you know, the sounds.
Yeah, that the sound in the film and also the sort of language of the film is a sort of trying to articulate, and rather than being inarticulate, it's like a sort of pre-articulation, or like excuse me, I have a bit of a cough. Like Artaud is the quote from Artaud at the beginning, that we don't know yet what the next world will be, but there is one. And somehow this singer trying to sing, and this kind of gibberish that we hear and the whispering, there's these languages that are trying to come through, or trying to invent something new. Yeah,
I think the what Artaud says at the very beginning is it's such an important statement, because it's like, it's that there are many different worlds that we can create, and we must allow our imagination the freedom to imagine other worlds, because we don't have to live in this world, and that's kind of the starting point. You know, you have to believe that for change, and of course things change. Things are always changing.
There's Alwyn playing or channeling this kind of energy force of Artaud, but also there's her in the landscape as a lone figure. And then we have all of these scenes of collective protest or collective resistance or change happening. Maybe if we could talk maybe about that relationship between the lone figure and the collective force, those two energies that are in the film.
It's sort of like what I was saying earlier, that we need to work with others, and we need to be able to be alone, basically. And everyone is alone ultimately, and there's a great sense of space in the film, and those really wide landscapes, and that's and of course the nature and everything, and the sea and the wild sea. It's just that really that that we have to come back to ourselves, as well as working with others and with the group. What she says about "I will never, never forget," that's a little reference to Anna Akhmatova, the Russian poet, because it's only just in recent years that I've been reading material to do with the wars, to do with the First and Second War. It's like it was always there. I couldn't face it. I couldn't read it. And I've been reading these accounts, and it's sort of like something I can do now that I'm older. And that's sort of whatever I have in this film is going to continue on into the next film, because we have to find some other way to sort things out apart from war. I mean, it's just so horrible and so awful and so useless. You know, we're going to have the commemorations of the First World War now, you know, this year. It is important never to forget, you know.
Okay, we'll take a few questions now, if we have anybody that would like to articulate.
Thanks so much, Vivienne. It was great to see your new film, and so lovely to sort of see the merging of the mythic with the kind of everyday quotidian on the street. And I feel you set us up in the language of your film, like you always kind of do. But I just wanted to ask you about a specific moment near the start, which I really enjoyed, which was the bit in the television and how you kind of moved through this scene, this black and white scene where there's a woman with a dead man, and she walks from room to room, and the camera kind of moves, and it sort of introduced the idea, I think, of moving between the interior and the exterior really nicely. But just wondered if you'd have anything more to share on that, on the choice of that and your intentions. Thank you.
Oh, it's difficult first of all, he's not dead. He's just, I don't know what happened to him. He's lying there and he kind of lifts his head up for a minute, and then when she comes back from the kitchen with a glass of water, he's gone. And there's just this picture there. It's just, that was shot in Cairo, and I think the Egyptians have a whole lot of films, which, I'm really not familiar with. This happened to be on TV just after I arrived. And I don't know, it's just so interesting to see in a place like Cairo something that's so familiar somehow. It looks like kind of a melodrama or something. And I suppose throughout the film, and I think this is true for other films I have, my other films as well, there are kind of echoes or references to other times often. And it's there, of course, with the stone and the pyramid, and it's just kind of mysterious or something. It doesn't have any meaning that I can really speak about, except I just like the way it looks.
You also, as we saw in She Had Her Gun already, also that we had appearing within the TV, so there's this kind of within the film, there's another little story going on. And in other films, you've like excerpts from the radio and the TV, and this kind of seeping in and out of sort of more mass media. Right, yeah, that's true. Working with Super 8 was how I started out many years ago. The sound is sync sound, single system sound. So you have the microphone on, and there's none of this control of sound that you'd have with 16 mils. So things leak in from the outside that just happen to happen at the moment when you're filming. And I used to really like that with Super 8 work. I used to like the things that would come in off the street or in the window or whatever, which you can hear in the first film. And I like that always with film, that it's kind of, there's things happening that are kind of inadvertent or that are accidental or whatever, like that. We had a question here in the third row.
It's kind of difficult. I'm just trying to formulate the question in my mind, but I suppose I'm trying to ask quite a broad, general thing. Do you see a way, a role where women would have power in helping to prevent war and in a way we're all complicit with it, because a lot of mothers are, there's the hero worship of soldiers, and quite often it's men that are actually sent to the war zones, but there are mothers and wives and sisters that are sometimes supporting it all. They've been, for whatever reason.
That's true. That's always happened throughout history. But then when it happens and people say, oh, God, why do we have this war? That happens again and again. It's kind of like, I suppose we do all have to do something about questioning the need for war. Of course, there's a whole other agenda. There's lots of other things behind that, like the arms sales of arms to all these countries. And that's kind of glossed over and not talked about very much, who's making the money off this, and we all know who. And is this an ethical thing? Lots of questions are around that. Of course, it's all incredibly complex, how things operate in the world. But it just seems that we all just have to keep trying to find a way to not allow it to happen. And it isn't easy. I mean, what was the guy who died, killed himself, so we think, or we don't know what happened to him, but who decided that, or who said, who'd been to Iraq and said there were no arms of mass, what was his name? Yeah, David Kelly, yeah. I mean, it's like, when it comes to the crunch and, the people in power, we have to stop allowing them making these decisions off their own bat when obviously there was so much opposition to the war that they actually went ahead and did it anyway. It just, we have to keep trying to stop that these decisions aren't made even though everyone's opposed to it.
Can I just add, I saw a quote yesterday, I can't remember which minister it was, whether it was the education minister or not, who was, or somebody was criticising Blackadder and other kind of portrayals, he called it lefty portrayals of war, as being run by incompetent elites, and saying this was not a very helpful, I don't remember the exact words, but that he didn't feel this was very helpful portrayal, and that it was distorted, actually. I don't know if anybody here remembers which minister it was that was... It was... okay, thank you. Obviously, we've got this disconnect.
Yes, there's a disconnect.
So maybe the other is also the people that we allow to rule us, the people that we consume their goods, which are fueling the arms industry and et cetera, et cetera. So the other is really the taxpayers that are funding it all. We've actually had Paul Krugman, is it Paul Krugman from America, the economist, saying that fiat money is fueled by taxpayers and men with guns. Mm-hmm. He's actually come out and been quoted saying that, because they were discussing Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and so forth. So, you know, this other, the title of your film, it's also, there's a big other leap between the people that are leading us and running corporations that we're giving our money and time to, and actually taxpayers and other people, and people that are putting themselves on the front line in these wars and coming back traumatized. Anyway, but the quote is what I really wanted to mention, that I can see now that the tide is turning. It's just whether people on the ground can actually get the momentum behind that wave to make it really unfashionable, as it were.
Well, it's the same thing with, say, the sweat factories in India or wherever, making all these cheap clothes, and the place goes on fire, and we're horrified looking at these stories, but we're still going to pennies to buy the clothes, you know. It's the same thing, yeah.
I suppose I want to follow up on that bit in maybe a different angle. Just thinking about, in the second film, the footage from Giza, and I'm guessing is that the Giant's Causeway at the beginning as well, by the sea?
No.
No. But this kind of monumental sort of natural architecture going out into the sea, and then, as you said, the artist talking about granite, and at the same time you have reeds and heathers, these very short-lived plants. So I was thinking about time in the film and how there are these human experiences occurring, like the protests in Tahrir, the economic protests in Ireland, but then at the same time this kind of geological time and natural time. And I wondered if you were thinking about how human experience and human life sort of falls in between these scales of time, and how that's another kind of irreducible difference, that we're different from the natural world in that sort of temporal way, because film is a time-based art.
Yeah, I don't know about being different from the natural world. I think we're part of the natural world, and we need to not forget that, really. And that's one of the things that Artaud was always trying to say, I think, is that you know, how in this world how we treat the natural world is we're dependent on it, basically.
But isn't the film speaking about that dislocation in a way, that tension between, and that's what it is. Because at one level you're talking about relationship as an ideal, but what I think for me the film brings up is a lot of dislocation. So with the schizophrenia of Artaud, you know, actually even dislocation within the self, or a sense of dislocation. Yes, we want to try and connect, but actually it's sort of showing kind of crevices of dislocation of different worlds that don't connect, that it seems even the way that you've filmed it or juxtaposed pieces that, or where's that, there's a sort of sense of dislocation. I'm just putting that as a question.
That's right. I mean, that's absolutely right. It's kind of both. It's both. It's shifting between one, a bit dislocation.
But that's like the illness that you were, yeah.
It's shifting between both. The whole structure of the film is fragmented, and that's... There is this sense of time as well, and commenting on other cultures from a distance, you know, that sort of filtering, you know, with the photographs of India. Like, how do we relate to someone from India, for example, someone from from Western culture? And it's also a time difference as well. The photographs are old.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it more as a sort of pluralistic rather than dislocation film. So it's like there are connections to be made.
Yeah.
So it's like an attempt at new kind of language. They're not like random images, I don't think. And there's sort of things that repeat or come back. There's like a rhythm where Artaud comes back in, and there's sort of some progressions, if you like, and then the Alwyn with the long-haired figure that's going through the landscape, and that comes to a kind of conclusion.
Yeah. I think the structure is, like Sarah said, it is fractured, it is dislocated, but somehow or another it isn't as well. The structure is very tight, and every second of it is. It's kind of fits, you know, even though it is dislocated. That's what I'm trying to do. A tension between the two. It's a tension between the two.
Thanks. Just curious about the first film, where that came from, where you were when you shot that. I mean, obviously New York, but sort of your place in your life. I mean, the second one seems to come from a sense of, like, despair for humanity or whatever, but what... I'm just interested in hearing about the first one a bit more.
I don't think there's despair for humanity. Very opposite. The first film, that was one of the first films I made. I made one or two films, one film before that. And it was made in New York, and it's when I was living there in the 70s, in the late 70s. I think, you know, it's about the relationship between two people is part of the story anyhow, and it's about identity as well, and it's power relations, and it's that song is about relationship, and in some ways it's kind of horrifying to me, the song. It was at the time, and I was asking questions around how does one relate to another? Is it always like that one has to put the other down, or how do you get it like more? And also stuff I'd read in philosophy was describing relationship as something that was conflictual, or that one had to dominate the other, and that I've always been kind of, you know, not unhappy with that, really. You know, I mean, I'm not really believing it, not believing that it has to be this way.
Thanks. Looking at a really early film of yours and a very contemporary film of yours, obviously there's a whole kind of life in between that. I just wondered, and I mean, formally there are kind of very strong connections, I think, to them. But I just wondered how you felt seeing those two films together.
I think that they work together in a peculiar kind of way, you know, and I like that. And
maybe this idea you had about relationship and dominance, this sort of a very personal one.
It continues with the second one, it is a subject of the second one for sure, yeah. I suppose how we're constructed or how we're constituted through imagery as well would be something that's there in both of them, through representation.
Also, your representation of women is something throughout your work, not just in these, is always something remarkable, because I suppose especially when you were making your first films, when you know, it was after like Mulvey had written about the male gaze and everything, and it was very difficult to even, you know, if you were so self-consciously feminist, it was even difficult. I mean, you've told me this, difficult in that time to film women or write narratives or represent them in ways that were sort of seen as negative, and that your film, She Had Her Gun Already, could have been seen as some kind of negative portrayal of women or relationships or how women deal with one another and so on as well. But you sort of went for it and went there.
Yeah, there was, at the time, there was mixed reaction to the film from some people, yeah.
But in this film, you're also, I suppose, to continue the point, in this newer film, there's a sort of representation of gender that we're not used to as well, I think, in film. Through Alwyn playing the figure of Artaud, and then also playing this figure striding through the landscape, and then the other sort of more documentary people that we meet as well, that you're sort of, you know, pushing ideas of what's expected.
Yeah, I mean, I generally am more interested in working with or representing women with my films, just because they've been a bit neglected throughout the history of film, sort of thing. So that's that's the reason. That is the reason. And plus, because I'm a woman myself, so I'm kind of I'm just more interested in it, maybe. But I've nothing against having men in film as well. One more question. Okay.
It's a very, it's not such a germane, central question, but it's just, I wondered whether it was important that Olwen enters that square pond and what it means, the square pond, if you could say.
Yeah. I don't really know how to answer that. I just know she wanted to get into that water. And it was winter time. It was January. I couldn't believe it, But I like it, though, and I like the way Jennifer does the sound with that when she's going into the water. It's slightly shocking to see suddenly her go into the water, I think. But it has no deep meaning behind it.
So do we have any other questions or comments to end? Oh, we're going to the bar. Okay, good. I'll have a hot whiskey, I think. So thank you very much, Vivienne. And thank you all for your questions.